Hello, and welcome to the final panel of the day for those coming today. Thank you for joining. Branding or Performance, Advanced TV, and its proper place in the modern media mix. We'll get going in a few minutes. I'd like to thank everybody for joining, those who are joining today. Curious, I know that we have upwards of a few hundred folks who have registered. Curious to know, and you can put it into the chat, where you may be coming from, which countries, continents, and what some of your questions may be. Thank you. And we'll get going in just about one more minute. We'll let people keep rolling in. I see some familiar names in our attendee list. I'd like to thank all of my extended family and cousins for joining us today. And looking in the chat, seems like we have some folks from the East Coast of the US who that's where several of us are zooming in from today. Love to know if folks are also the end of the day in Europe. We know it's a little late, but we appreciate you being here. And we actually have a panelist who's it's the middle of the night for one of our panelists, so we're especially grateful for that. I think with that, we can get started. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'll start with our late night guest. I'd like to introduce Laura Chaibi, who's one of the most insightful and brightest researchers in the media and technology space I've known for a while. She is a much sought after voice, particularly around advanced media and advertising. Laura Chaibi, you can turn on your camera. And there she is. Welcome aboard.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here.
Next, I'd like to introduce Jacqueline or Jackie Vanover, who is the Vice President of DSP Product at MediaMath, with a remarkable background in particularly the television and television advertising space. I'll let her give her own background if she likes. Welcome aboard, Jackie Vanover.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thank you. And last and absolutely least, Jass Santoro, Senior Vice President of Advanced TV and Video at Cadent, an advanced TV firm, well known in media spaces, and grateful for what he's going to bring today. So welcome to the Smart Jet, Jass.
Did you say last and least? Did I catch that right, Andrew?
No, that was a.
I think he said best.
Thanks a lot.
As we board the Smart Jet, it's ladies first. So I think with that,
I'm happy to be last, Andrew, just not least. Okay.
Well, I mean, Jass, I'm giving you the cockpit, and you're going to fly this one. And, I'm going to get back and relax. So I appreciate everybody coming and doing this. Maybe this may be one of the last times we have to do this virtually. We can sort of see each other in person in the future, I hope soon. The setup for today, and I really appreciate everybody being willing to do this, is around connected TV and the degree to which it as a format, as a medium, is going to become a replacement for, adjunct to what we think of as traditional television. And where is CTV best serving the needs of advertisers? Is it the branding medium of the future to replace television as we know it? Or is it really just a bigger, brighter, better version of all the digital media we've seen over the past several decades that will drive performance and be evaluated on its ability to almost instantly deliver business outcomes? And is there any friction in that conversation? With that, I think I'd like to start with Laura, because I know that Laura's actually done quite a bit of her homework getting ready for this. And so I'd like to ask you, Laura, why don't you tell us about yourself, where you're zooming in from, and let's kick off the discussion.
Hi, everyone. As I said, it's really great to be here. I'm actually based right now in the Middle East, in Dubai, but I'm from Canada. I'm North American, and I've worked all over the world. I lived in Australia. I was nearly 20 years in the UK. I'm ex-AOL, ex-BBC, ex-Yahoo, ex-France Telecom. I'm basically right across the media ecosystem, but from the technology and media side. So I've had a great opportunity to look under the hood at a lot of kit. And where I thought we should actually start is, for some people, they may not be familiar with working across connected TV, or I'm sure we have a lot of people on the phone, on the line right now, who have a lot of great experience, and they're hoping for some answers with what's happening with a cookieless world and how targeting will change. I think what's really important is if we start with definitions. So certainly worldwide, connected TV means different things to different people. And I've got sort of 6 buckets, believe it or not, of what connected TV can be. The first one is your straight, hardware, which is your set-top box with a TV and some sort of cable connection, whether it's an IPTV, a broadband connection, or, a fiber optic cable connection. And that gives all kinds of different opportunities. I think that a lot of people are familiar with that with linear television and buying advertising spaces. You then have the operating system model, where it's probably an iOS, Android infrastructure, and those infrastructures allow you to buy ads almost similar to how you would buy them online. Or it could be, for example, from the smart TV manufacturers themselves, who are also equally keen to get into the advertising ecosystem, whether it be Samsung, LG, and sell you advertising opportunities. I think moving on, there are traditional established infrastructures with cable operators, but also the telcos. And what I would say is, worldwide, I think a lot of the interesting movements are with telco companies that, they're putting in the wires. They have the ability to understand what your hardware is, your software is, and also mediate themselves into that solution, whether it's through dynamic ad insertions. They can also see what content you're watching, so they can do frame by frame analysis and maybe even do future product placements in a dynamic way. So there's lots of opportunities and innovation on what might be coming down the pipeline world over. And then, OTT, we've got Netflix. Is Netflix, it's subscription, but come on, they're making money from their content with product placement. So we can't put them out of the game. And then you've got, Andrew, the great word that you taught me the other day, FAST models, which is the sort of the free ad served television. And in my neck of the woods is actually free sat, which is free satellite connection. Unlike the US, where you might be paying over $100 a month for your premium television, in a lot of other parts of the world, you simply need a box, a TV, and a satellite dish, and you can easily get over 300 TV channels for free without any subscription. So these are the kinds of models. I think the one today, I'd love to hear from the rest of the panel on where we're going to focus our time and attention.
Thank you, Laura. I think I will let Jackie introduce herself, and also offer up some of what we'll get into today.
So thank you very much, Laura. Thanks for setting the stage and the baseline with all of those definitions. I have been, as Andrew said, I've had a long, I kind of grew up in linear ad tech before it was even called ad tech, and I have been working in programmatic for several years now. And so I have seen this sort of shift between, okay, display. Oh, wait, there's a whole bunch of other things out there. And I think it's super interesting for us to talk about the other things out there. So CTV, OTT, how they all merge, how they work together. how they play with what we traditionally thought of as, advertising as a whole. And then also market by market. I think, Laura, you brought this up, that it's very different market by market. And that's really what we're seeing as a global DSP at MediaMath, is that the market by market specific strategies are really important.
That's great. And we'll be sure to not visit too much of our own North American bias on this.
It's a big, important market. It's not a bias. There's money to be made.
But, Laura, we include you in that as our Canadian cousin. We're grateful to have a Canadian on the panel today. That's good.
Thanks.
And then Jass, please introduce yourself and some of the things you want to make sure we cover.
Sure. I'm Jass Santoro. I currently work at Cadent, an AdvancedTV platform. My background really starts in traditional linear television on the agency side as an investment lead, a buyer. I from there went on to the, as we call it, the sell side. So I worked for a handful of networks. Predominantly my time there I spent at Comcast, and then took a swerve into Adtech, almost 15 years ago on the ad server side, the DSP side, the identity side. So I've kind of played a lot of different sides of the market, but my time is predominantly spent commercially focused. So working with brands and their respective agencies in many cases to try to design and implement TV audience solutions. So I think the perspective that I would like to bring to the panel is that of being on the front line with brands, the challenges that they're facing, and how our company and the market in general is trying to help create solutions that'll help them navigate what has been an extremely uncertain world with respect to television and distributing television content. And I do look at it predominantly through the lens of the US market. But certainly we have some at Cadent, we have some advancements in some other markets, and I can give some perspective there as well.
That's great. Thank you. My name is Andrew Rosenman. I'm leading the CTV product marketing globally for Smart Ad Server, a global SSP ad serving company. Excited to be here, and thank you all again for joining. Why don't we start with, and I think Jass, maybe explaining how Cadent uses traditional television in a less than traditional way to deliver audiences, maybe a good setup for how we get into that kind of next generation of television, which is CTV. I think it's a fascinating model.
Sure. I'll try to keep it top line, but Cadent's history is linear television, starting really on the cable side and then expanding in the broadcast, the foundation of our business. On the cable side, Cadent's actually, maybe not under the name Cadent, but the company and the model has been around for a couple decades now. The general premise is to work with all of the MVPDs across the US. So yeah, 200 plus MVPDs, which many times people don't think of that many when they just think of a few big guys, satellites or cable companies. But over 200 of them aggregated across 210 DMAs. And what we do is we've created technology and relationships that allow us to aggregate the local avails across all of the networks that they carry. And that gives us a unique way to provide a solution to the market in linear television, where clients that want to use us for scale and range and a very objective look at every network and not be kind of looking at it through a media portfolio, we provide them a fantastic solution, and we also do it with a tremendous amount of efficiency off of national rates. That model we translated into broadcast. So rather than working with the MVPDs, we work with the station groups. And so difference there is the same local avails, but do it through the stations themselves. And then over the last handful of years, to kind of bridge it into connected TV, naturally, we've seen a tremendous amount of migration of audiences that have now decided to take more choice and control over the way they get their content. And so that would be kind of as Laura was laying out with the different ways that she looks at connected TV. And so we've developed the solutions to allow our clients to, again, through an agnostic way, an objective way, look at all these audiences as they migrate, and the market gets a bit diluted from linear into connected TV. But it's critical. I don't think you find a lot of people that are only watching linear and only watching connected TV. So it's pretty critical to make sure that as an advertiser, you have solutions that can help you span those two environments with a little bit of simplicity.
I'm glad you said two really important words. One is audience and the other is people. And I think we lose track on the tech side sometimes that the objective of all this tech and all of these operating methods that we're promoting, like programmatic, is really to find people who are willing to entertain buying a product or service from an advertiser. And so, the reason why I wanted to start with how you're currently looking at traditional television inventory, which is scheduled avails across networks. There's inventory that's shared for the global audience. We should mention it's a very North American thing that distributors are given 2 minutes per programming hour of television content to do with as they may. Often they use it to promote their own products and services. But there's also a fairly, multi-billion-dollar television business that surrounds that. So in other words, these are pieces of inventory from traditional broadcasts that are that you're then sourcing on behalf of advertisers, which feels a lot like how impressions are sourced. And so I want to go to Jackie now, given your background in broadcast and understanding how much value was put against gross rating points in individual markets, and now the idea of impressions against individual or multiple segments of audiences and consumers. This is the setup for you to then tell us, how are you fixing it for us, Jackie? How are you bridging this gap for?
No pressure, no pressure.
No pressure.
Go ahead, fly the plane, Jackie.
Yeah, I have thought it was funny because for the last year we have been talking in the industry. So like back up a little bit. I have been working. I started my career right out of college as a media buyer, sort of like Just did, buying very local spots for all over North America. And back then, when I literally had to pull out a book and look up a rating point to figure out what I wanted to buy, the Holy Grail was getting to person level information, right? Everything we did was trying to get closer and closer and closer to who were the people. I was a media buyer in the auto industry. And so, who was the person who was going to buy that car? And it was all about who was the person who was going to buy that car. And so fast forward more years than I want to admit, we get to the world of programmatic, where literally everything is at the person level. It's at the device level, but we typically think of, as you said, a device being used by a human, a person. I hope. Not in all cases. Thank you for reminding me of that, Laura. But yes, in the best of cases, being used by a person. And so it's very interesting to me that now we are thinking about. Now I hear people talking about, well, we really need to go backwards to this aggregated model and to this aggregated idea of households and this aggregated idea of people. And I'm like, wait a second, we've been trying for 20 plus years to get away from that. And so I think what I see developing, though, is this very interesting dynamic where people where advertisers really need to understand, both at a macro level and at an extreme micro level, who they are trying to reach and who is important to them. And I think that is actually where the most interesting interplay between traditional television and then CTV and OTT and all of these very addressable digital forms becomes it just becomes the most creative and the most interesting and quite possibly the most profitable for advertisers and the most interesting for people as well, because people, we always talk about this promise of getting the advertising that matters to you, but it's really quite true that I would prefer to turn on my I'm old school. I still have a cable box in my house. And I would prefer to turn on my cable box and see an ad and not see ads that are completely inappropriate for me and my family at 6 o'clock in the evening. And, you know, and so I think this play between this micro and macro targeting place where we're understanding at a macro level, what are the types of households we want to reach? What are the characteristics of those people? And then utilizing the technology in a people-friendly way, because we need to be respectful of people and their privacy, in a people-friendly way to get to this micro level, so where we can make the advertising really relevant to them is going to be the most interesting development.
So I want to come back to that because I think you said something important, which is household addressability versus individual addressability, and this could be an entirely separate panel. But I think that's very important, and the micro and the macro. And the premise of this panel was, what is the best and highest use of that screen in the middle of the household that gets everybody's focus? So we will be coming back to it. I want to go back to Laura, though. You listed out a few of these different models, and we're counting on you to represent not only the Canadian, but the rest of the global view on things. I'm having fun with my Canadian friends. So, you know, we talk about these, you talked about these OS models, the hardware models, you know, set tops on cable. Most people globally aren't subscribers to multi-channel packages. There are a lot of different ways of getting it, but IP has really unlocked a lot of access for people to content and content to people, which is creating these apertures for advertisers, which may not have existed before. I'd like you to spend a little bit more time about what you called sort of the aggregation model, because I think what we're seeing, at least in the US market, is that it's the aggregators of a lot of this content who are putting UIs together on top of it, whether the OEM manufacturers or the connected device manufacturers. They seem to be getting the scale, and they also have the insight to have a really interesting offering. I'm so curious about your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the market. If you look at like a market like the UK, for example, Sky was an early one out the gate post, and they felt like what happens, it's very different measuring the USA to the rest of the world. So let me just back up a step and explain this, because it's important, you know, on why the rest of the world does things differently. So you've got the Media Ratings Council in the USA, and typically what happens is the US is an open market. You don't believe in having what are called single currency models for measurement, where we all go, this is what we want. This is the company we've picked to measure it. We're all going to agree. We're going to use this as our source of truth and our language to conduct business. In the USA, it's very different. That's actually deemed anti-competitive. You have, this is the minimum requirements we need for measurements. This company over here is setting those requirements, and then there are auditors in the background you can hire to engage and prove. Oh, Celine, can you please go on mute so we can hear you? But thank you. Your accent is beautiful from France. So you then have this open market where the minimum bar is set, and then you trade on value with value-added services on what you can do over and above the minimum with regards to measurement. Now, what happens in a lot of the other parts of the world are what are called JICs, or joint industry communities. They're not-for-profit models.
Calme-toi, chérie, calme-toi. Calme-toi.
Shall we chat with her?
I will find her.
Okay, you do that. So listen, so a joint industry committee model is where all parts of the value chain come together in a not-for-profit organization. And so you have the advertisers, you have the agencies, you have the publishers. And we put in our money, we agree on what we want as our measurement, and then we commission, and we have a vendor of choice. So in the UK, for example, the model is called Barb for television, and the contract has just been re-awarded to Kantar, and it's likely the contract will go to 2029. So it's a long-term contract. And with that, we can come together collectively, we can have our understanding of what we need for measurement, and we understand what are our trade-offs. There are always going to be things we can't do, what we can do. Now that kind of model it's great for getting to go further together for how we do business, but it's terrible for innovation. And so, Sky built its own first party panel. They wanted to do dynamic ad insertion. They were running much faster than the market. And so that meant that they needed their own solutions. And so they were running in parallel. A lot of television companies worldwide, they have first party data. When you buy the equipment and you get the subscription, you are getting some level of household. They have really smart data science teams that can actually do almost like a DNA fingerprinting of like program bouquets to start to understand even like the speed at which you change the channels. You can create a DNA of the household and who is potentially watching in the household. And with that, you can do amazing things. I think, the main thing is, like you said, Andrew, the advertiser wants to know who the audience is. And I think this is a completely left field. I'm going to throw at everyone, but in places like in places like the UK, the Park TV, direct marketing is very sophisticated. There are models called Mosaic, for example, or Acorn, a census of regional neighborhoods. And at postcode level in the UK, each postcode represents 10 households. And when you target by postcode, you are targeting 10 households that typically are in the same neighborhood and have similar characteristics enough to be able to do sophisticated targeting. So if you come back to that automotive brand manufacturer, he knows there's going to be certain households where they're on commuter belts and their propensity to want to buy a car because they need it is high, and that information. And so, like, for example, Experian owns Mosaic. I think they now have over 4,000 data points per household, and that information can be married with television data, for example, to be able to construct, what are we buying? Unfortunately, that level of sophistication is not worldwide. A postcode in France is targeting about 1,000 households, so you don't get the level of granularity. When I was at Yahoo, we actually used postcode as a discriminator to start to understand targeting. And we had something called the P cookie, which was the postcode cookie associated with where you live. And I would strongly recommend, I know it's difficult in America to get the industry together because it's deemed anti-competitive, but the rest of the world does this, where we go is are postcodes a viable alternative to not being able to use IP or cookies?
I'd love to make a comment on that, because that's precisely what we're working on. We made an acquisition a little over a year and a half ago of a company called 4Info. And one of the key assets that that drove that acquisition was a household identity graph that goes back to 11-digit postcode. And so when we think about resolving ID, we resolve back to the physical household address.
Yeah. And
then certainly, we attribute an IP to that and then devices to that. And we'll all see what happens with device IDs. And but always been building a platform that is not reliant on cookies. And I agree with you, Laura. I think we look at it as that physical address is a very good, unique identifier to have. And then, so what we're doing, and listen, this is a constant evolution, but Jackie made a comment about watching television with your family. Like, what we're trying to do is just figure out, how do we just get more precision? So linear television still is a really good immediacy of reach driver for any advertiser that needs that. Absolutely. And so what we look at it as is, certainly we've had clients, the market has bought on this 18 to 49, 25 to 54 currency for years. And you have to kind of chuckle at that. I know it's a lot of procurement rooted in that, and rates of change and mixed media models and so forth. But as someone who, though, I like to think I don't look like it, I am creeping up on the end of that 18 to 49 demographic. I'm not there yet.
People aren't targeting you anymore, are they?
On it.
Yeah, it's less ads.
The point is, I'm toward the end of that demo. My life related to somebody who's 18 or 19 or 20 years old is dramatically different. Outside of maybe some toothpaste and deodorant, we're probably focused on a lot of different things with respect to what we want or need to buy. You know, like I'm a suburban dad. I'm not authorized to buy, you know, a cool sports car, right? So, but I think that what we're trying to do is how do we just drive a little bit more relevancy into that messaging? So Jackie, what we're always going to have some level of audience spill, but can we mitigate the amount of ads that we see that aren't relevant? Because listen, it's an ad driven, certainly in the US and Andrew with his fast, you know, we're an ad supported content distribution country, you know, and so we just have to drive a little more relevance there. And so we look at it as how do we now kind of like take that and create our own little funnel out of it. Linear is important. Linear is important, mitigate the waste that we can with that objective view that I had mentioned earlier. And then when you move into connected TV, then you have a little bit more precision against those households. And then Andrew, you kind of set me up earlier. The same model we have with our linear avails, we do that with addressable avails across all of the providers of set-top box addressable. And now we're hoping that we're in a position and that we can start influencing decisions of households, have that identifier of the household, and just all start getting extract a little bit more return on that investment.
Yep. So I will see your mitigate or you know, reduce waste as much as possible and raise you one more because you know, frequency of seeing the same ad over and over again is another form of waste that people that advertisers desperately want to mitigate. So, you know, the more and more we can zero in, and I love your example, Laura, of the you know, 10-person postcode, because it reminds me of some work that I did you know, earlier in my career when I worked for some of the measurement one of the measurement providers, and we had this like mosaic type study, and we could use that to combine it with linear and really get to some interesting insights around what we would call today a cohort of people who you know, maybe maybe come together to understand, you know, in their buying patterns. But I think that goal really has to be to utilize both technologies for what they are great for. So again, linear TV, reach-based, as you said, you know, like broadcast linear TV, reach-based, still a good driver of just awareness type of advertising. And then
that and view through. I mean, let's be realistic. The average view through on YouTube. So your trade off from TV is a trade down to YouTube. Okay, maybe I don't know what the rate in America is. Maybe it's $6 per 1,000 contacts, or you know. But the view through is less than 6%. So now as a marketer, you can't even justify the production budget because so few people are getting through the ad, and it's very difficult to tell a decent story in 6 seconds.
6 seconds. You're right. Yeah, it's a really great point. And so, you know, so that engagement model, which is what I've seen some people coming to the market with, how engaged are these ads, how engaged are people? And then the follow up on that behind the engagement to how do we then layer on not just in TV, but in the rest of our media, continue to tell that story, continue to reach that person, and then not reach them in such a way where they're like, oh, okay, I've seen your, you know, there's like a classic example of you know, retargeting being like way too intrusive. You know,
the worst is when you're doing research for your parents and it's not even things that you want to buy, and you're like, oh my God, how embarrassing, I've been researching this item. You know, high involvement goods are not single person decision making. Oftentimes there may be 4 or 5 people in the decision making process, and they need exposure.
Perfect.
Like Jess says, he's not authorized to make any decision.
Although I'm sure both your son and you are fighting over like noise cancellation headsets, right?
So no, I'm so glad you said that though, because a lot of this comes back to, and the premise that I think we boarded this plane thinking we were going to talk about was, okay, is CTV best used for that direct response, immediate purchase, performance-based type of model that we see applied to a lot of digital media, or the let's create demand for the product and let other channels deliver on the transaction? And we said a really important thing here. There are, look, we call it a device graph, but it's a graph of people, right? It's a graph of, right? They are analogs for people and people who influence purchases. I mean, in Jess's case, there is, you know, clearly somebody who influences purchases. In my case, I know that my family tells me exactly what to get and not. So Jess and I are there. So it comes back to the question of, given that CTV on the large screen in the middle of the living room is generally reaching greater than one person, it is not a one, right? It is not a one-to-one, is the best and highest use. And I think you're right, Jackie, you need to connect it to the other formats that then let you carry someone through your story, through your purchase funnel. But we need to, I mean, I'm not trying to be provocative, but am I really gonna pick up, is it for DR? Is that really what we're gonna do?
I think it can be. And I think there's some really innovative, we are working with some interesting partners who have really innovative creative formats, not just in the US, but across many geographies. Australia being a super interesting one, if we have anyone from down under. I think it can be, and I think there are DR advertisers who have for many years understood how to take that big screen in your living room and make it a funnel or a useful device for DR, and getting that response. I think, we've seen that for many years. But I think it depends on, I think you really have to understand your branding, your strategy. What are the outcomes that you as a marketer are driving towards, and how, and again, what is the best tool? What is the best use of each tool, and how do you make that smart decision? And I think I think it's really smart. We have a lot of clients at MediaMath who really rely on us as a service provider to help them. And I'm sure at Cadent you do too. We really do a lot of advisory in this area. And I would say lean on your providers for their smarts and their services, because we're living and breathing this stuff every day, and we're seeing lots of different types of advertisers. We're seeing lots of different use cases. We're seeing lots of different outcomes, and we are happy to advise any marketer that wants to talk to us.
And Andrew, can I add to Jackie? Oh, we've all got something to say. Can I add to Jackie's point? So, what's amazing about connected TV is you can start to do testing and test and learn in a way that you can't when it's live and linear. Your opportunities, there are each one has its strengths. Let's make this really, really clear. But for example, if you want to do creative testing in different regions to go, is my message on point? Am I doing a message that's very risky? Okay, let's do it in a very small tactical way. And then if we get the response that we're hoping for, let's scale it. So you can experiment in a way with connected TV that perhaps that you can't with linear, because once it's out, like if it's a Super Bowl moment, that's it. You get one shot. There's no reruns. I think the other thing that is really amazing, what I've seen in other markets, is actually, particularly in the UK, is connected TV has brought new advertisers to television. Because in the past they were just like, what, I can't afford it. It's out of reach. My brand isn't big enough. Maybe I'm a retailer or brand that's only in one very specific community. Now, all of a sudden, there's an opportunity in front of them that they never thought that they would have. And I'll give you an example. In the early days when I was at Yahoo, you could reach 60% of the internet audience with one homepage takeover. Now, there was always an ad at the very bottom of the homepage. And a lot of people position this and they say, well, that's a waste of an ad because it never gets seen. No, the pricing of that ad was always relative to the opportunity to be seen, which was less. But then you had the $1 million opportunity to be seen on a homepage. It's a reputation play that in no other way could you have afforded or bought that opportunity previously. And so it brings new entrants that are coming up the funnel into the market that wouldn't have maybe considered these as opportunities.
So Jess,
I'm going to pile on the agreement here. So Laura and Jackie, a couple points. So Laura, I totally agree with you. I like to refer to it as democratizing the ability to buy television, place television investments. And that's exactly what it's done, right? And that's what CTV has done, because you can actually spend a small amount of money, not have to go buy a schedule of spots that you're forced into stuff that you maybe don't want to buy. But I think with respect to, it kind of leads to trying to answer the question of, is it branding or performance? And it's both. Like, so Jackie, you mentioned two really important things there too. One is, what is my KPI? Like some advertisers might need to have a, something X return on investment, and they'll know what they can pay. So maybe their play in connected TV is buying remnant inventory, akin to how direct response advertisers go into the television market and clear what they clear at the price they're willing to pay.
Yep.
And then there's other advertisers that if you're selling a car or launching a movie, then you've got to have reach these 2 weeks, no questions asked. I'm going to pay the freight to make sure that I'm going to get this number of people exposed to my ad.
Your coverage.
And so it really depends. And connected TV can assist in both of those. One of the things Jackie brought up earlier, which I think is completely under-discussed and under-evaluated, is creative. And I think that is a battleground that still needs to be kind of paved out. You have some really unique, you have companies that have been in market forever, such as Innovid and Brightline, that have really taken a position in trying to give different levels of customization and interactivity to creative and CTV. And are we at a point now, are those companies going to show that they were ahead of their time, where now we can start with frequency and reach, get the tools in place to know that I've planted the seed at these really high levels of linear television, which is still critical in a media mix. But then when I'm increasing frequency or extending reach into connected TV environments, then maybe it's time to start asking more questions or trying to drive a more customized ask into the creative, as opposed to just that broad reach message.
I completely agree with Jess. And if you look at who the headline advertisers are in the television world, what you'll see is they are some of the smartest e-commerce and online brands that have simply exhausted all opportunities that they've had at the lower end of the funnel. And they know they have to have TV on the plan simply because they don't have any other way to grow.
And Laura, they're okay with that. The return on ad spend model they had that might have been 4x in digital, they're okay with it being 2x in TV. They know it's not going to be as good, but the volume you pick up at the end of the day is worth increasing your customer base.
I think this is a very good point that you make, Jess, because we see this too. I totally agree with you. We're seeing a ton of new entrants into the CTV and OTT, and like these unique formats allow people to, I love that, democratize the purchase of high-end video advertising. And however, I also think that we need to work with the marketing with the marketing teams higher up to understand that when you start to grow into these areas, you need to change your expectations about return on ad spend, about cost, about frequency, about how many impressions you're going to get and leverage, and what the best use of your money is. And like those are the things that become more challenging when you start having a more advanced media mix and a more advanced media model.
So in your experience then, do you find that people more familiar with buying on digital metrics, visiting a television format, that it's difficult to have it connect? I mean, I think
we haven't talked about the organizational divide.
You got 2 minutes.
An entirely different panel.
So I think there are parts of the organization that don't have a problem with this, and then there are other parts of the organization that are like, what? But they're both in their gray zone. So it's a learning, it's an opportunity and a learning. It's a great learning opportunity and an opportunity for collaboration across different parts of the organization, whether within an agency or brand direct or other places. It's just, I think it's a really unique opportunity for anyone who's been in the space, in either part of the space, for a while.
And I would love to add to Jackie to say, one of the most challenging things in the early days of digital, and I've been around the block too, is the clients used to say to me, okay, so Laura, so if I spend like $250,000, okay, that's great. But what if I want to spend $2 million?
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to get for that? And the thing is there are such great models in television that can tell you at what point you get diminishing returns on your investment based on your reach and coverage. And the reason is because the universes are clearly defined and measurable. Whereas in digital, you get this perception that there's this infinite opportunity, but with infinite, it means that you've got no idea, if I double my budget, am I wasting money, or actually am I still underspending? And I think like I'm digital through and through. I'm 20 years in digital, but I'm going to call, I can't say swear words, but you know what I want to say. That, okay, yeah, digital is most measurable. And yes, digital, you can go down to the individual level, but come on, we don't have a universe to go, did I reach the coverage of what I really care about? And frankly, shame on YouTube, shame on Facebook. You're selling me people. I don't always know if it's the right people. And I just think that they've dropped the ball on being able to do things. Come on, everyone loves.
Or if it's the same person.
Yeah. Do you remember like the frequency ads? And okay, this is digital speak, but do you remember the great television ads of the woman and the guy is always trying to like borrow a cup of sugar or, borrow some coffee, and it's like, okay, what's the next sequence in the ad? Are they going to get together? Like this kind of great, execution of
Tell me the
storytelling.
rest of the story.
It still hasn't come in digital, and I can't understand why.
Well, I think the recap is he never asked for a second cup at home. For those of you who remember that, Jess, I'm going to let you, while we get our seatbelts on to land the plane, I'm going to let you do your sort of recap, because I think there was a lot of really good information, both from Jackie and Laura, a lot to think about. I'm going to hand it to you, co-pilot, bring us in.
I guess I'll just try to land this thing with saying what's unique about the connected TV space, and I think it does tie back to branding versus performance and democratizing and big advertisers. And Jackie, you kind of set us up here. You've got two distinctly different streams of demand coming into it, which is interesting, right? Like you've got television advertisers that are migrating with those viewers that have, and over the last year, accelerated the dilution out of linear into IP connected environments. And then you've got your digital natives, so to speak, that are, so whether it be the DTCs that Laura mentions, or you've got a lot of digital money that is now at the point where there's more sophistication in targeting, there's more sophistication in measurement and attribution, that you've got that stream of money coming in. And to Jackie's point about living in a siloed media kind of planning and execution world, which as much as everybody says it's not, it totally is. So it's unique. You have completely two different, like there's two different demand streams colliding into this space, and that's okay. But to me, it just symbolizes that there are because the market will bear what the market will bear. Branding advertisers are there because it's working for them as best they can evaluate today. Digital, more maybe return centric advertisers are there because it's working for them and the best they can evaluate today. And I think that's a fun marketplace to be working in.
That's great. I want to thank everyone for joining. I think, I know.
Did we answer the question, by the way, Andrew? There was a question on the chat.
Well, no, but I think we wrote our headline for next year's panel, and I hope all three of you will rejoin again on the structural questions inside of the buy side that Jackie mentioned. I think it's the third rail, but I think we probably need to address it at some point. But we have to leave our audience wanting more. We're media people, we know that. So
next year you can pile us on this jet, fly us to Cannes, and we'll all meet there and we'll continue the conversation.
In this plane, by the way.
That's right.
This plane.
That sounds fair. And I just want the audience to notice that on the Smart Jet, there doesn't seem to be anybody in the cockpit. So I just realized that.
Don't you know,
thank you all for joining.
All right, guys, thanks for the invite, Andrew, and thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Definitely.
Bye.